time to test your software.
Yeah.
Nothing like testing in production, right?
What's a dev environment? I haven't heard one of those in ages now.
Yes, well, the combination of Mac and Chrome bites us again.
It's always so funny to me where it's like, oh, Mac, like we're the super secure ecosystem, right? And you're gonna have to ask for permission to do anything on Mac. It's like, okay, but at what cost? Because this is getting annoying.
There we go.
Hey!
All right, at this point, I'm going to step off the stage and let Jasna take over.
Thank you, Justin. Sorry about that. It was clearly working yesterday. So thanks again to everyone for being here. Before I begin, I just want to acknowledge that diversity, inclusion, and its evolving acronyms are still, unfortunately, controversial topics. I was just reminded of this yesterday on the internet, especially in more homogenous spaces like tech, back-end development, and Scala in particular. Some people approach these topics with apathy, cynicism, dismissal, or even outright hostility. Nonetheless, the NE Scala organizers believe D&I is important to recognize and improve in our community as both a moral and practical imperative. As some of the symposium's previous talks have emphasized or demonstrated, Scala's vitality as a technical language depends on its people. And the more folks with different perspectives we can welcome, the better our community and the language will be. I want to make a special shout out to Noel and Scala Bridge London, the Google Center of Code mentors as well from today for this shared mission. So for that reason, we hold this space for Scala developers from underrepresented backgrounds to talk about what D&I and Scala means to them and how we can foster and improve it. So we're that much more grateful for the bravery and generosity these panelists have shown to volunteer for this roundtable. With this context, I want to remind our panelists and the audience members of our code of conduct. Please be good to and supportive of each other. I'm going to now just ask everyone to give a quick intro of themselves, as much info as you're comfortable to say. Your like how you would like to be called, your pronouns, and where you're based, and how you're currently involved with Scala, professionally or for fun, if you still are. So I'll start real quick. My name is Jasna. I'm based in the Washington, D.C. area. I go by she, they pronouns, and I'm currently doing Scala at Etsy as a software engineer on an ML, a machine learning orchestration team. Next, I'll call on some folks. So Eric, you can go next.
Yeah, my name's Eric Fredericks. I've been a software engineer for like 26 years. A lot of that time was Java. Made the switch to Scala in 2014. And I use he, him, his pronouns. I live in Chicago with my husband, Archie. He's not a developer, so it actually creates a nice balance in our household. And I got into Scala working at Here Technologies, formerly Nokia, formerly Navtech, if you remember those company names. And yeah, it was like a slow move to OO Scala, and I did OO Scala a lot. I was at Rally Health in Chicago for a while. Now I'm at Jack Henry and Associates, and it's a great fit for me because I've been wanting to level up to the type level. And I find that attending this conference, these couple of days here, I have been exposed to information that is resonating with me more because of where I'm sitting now in my work. In the past, I would attend this conference and be like, oh my gosh, all this stuff's over my head. So progress. And the other thing I do is I teach computer science at DePaul University in Chicago. As an adjunct, I teach one course. So I'm very involved in education and and I just love coding. So glad to be here.
Thanks, Eric. Thanks also for helping create another generation of developers with your teaching. How about Monica next?
Hi. Yeah, so my name is Monica. I'm a junior software developer at JP Morgan, and I've actually just come up to my kind of like first year of this like kind of graduate job, but also first year of racing Scala, and I go by she, her pronouns. So.
And I want to just say Monica recently spoke at Scala Days Madrid, so congrats.
Thanks.
Being here. And then next, how about Francisco?
Yeah, sure. My name is Francisco Aramburo. He, him pronouns. I am Mexican, so I live in Puebla, Mexico. So it's a city 2 hours away from Mexico City. So currently I'm a staff engineer at Etsy. I'm also at the ML enablement teams. I'm actually a co-worker of Jasna. Besides that, I also have a small entertainment company called Drunken Drone Entertainment. And I also like a lot, spreading the Scala love. So soon enough, I'll start a Mexico City Scala users group to get more Mexicans excited about Scala. I have 9 years of Scala experience developing with different companies. I recently moved back to Mexico because I spent 6 years in the Netherlands, especially the Amsterdam area. It's big in Scala. So, a lot of companies are doing interesting things there. I did contracting there for some big companies like ING, FedEx, Vion. But besides missing the nice weather, the nice people, and the nice food, I also wanted to come back here to Mexico because one of the main issues in Mexico is all this brain leak. So everyone that we have a lot of very intelligent people here in Mexico, but everyone lives to America, Europe, etc. So I think it's important we keep nourishing that potential of Mexicans, but within the country, and make them stay here. Thankfully, there's like great companies like Etsy, which have created new offices here, and we're able to work from here and have all the great benefits of working at Mexico, but also for a great company. There's also a lot of really nice startups going on here, so it's exciting times to be Mexican. That's me. Thank you.
Thank you, Francisco. It's inspiring to hear you're fostering good Scala support in Mexico. Thank you for all that, and excited to see more of your Scala workshop at Etsy. And last but not least, my good friend Adam.
Hey everyone, my name's Adam Edwards. I go by Decorum on the internet and most of the places, right? The place formerly known as Twitter, you can find me there on Decorum BLB. Pronouns are they, he, and I have been a software engineer now, since 2012, so going on 11 years. I was first introduced to Scala when I had a contracting gig at Bank of America Merrill Lynch in their foreign exchange department back in Chicago. I helped build a rates engine for their foreign exchange team there. And I really fell in love with the language at that time, but weren't a lot of other shops hiring for it back in 2014. So the next time I reunited with Scala would have been with Jasna and Eric at Rally Health in 2018. And I've been back on the Scala train for a while now. I'm currently at Disney Streaming, or Walt Disney Company, or however you want to break that down, the supermassive conglomerate ruled by the mouse. And I work over in the billing department there, particularly in tooling. Ironically, unfortunately, my job is actually reducing our Scala footprint right now, primarily because I know, I apologize in advance, but
get off the stage. I'm kidding.
But no, so we already have a lot of microservices written in Scala, and they're very efficient and everything of that nature. But we wrote a bunch of other Scala microservices to sit on top of that, specifically for like billing tooling and customer support tooling. And it just kind of like got to be a bit too expensive for Disney. So we're now replacing that with just a Node.js middle layer as a gateway, basically, to those Scala backends. But I'm also part of a Scala group, if you will, focused on like modernizing our tool chains for our Scala microservices and trying to see if Scala 3 is a viable path forward for us. I personally argue yes. Why are we still biting this bullet? But yeah, that's me right now.
Great. Thanks, Adam. Sorry to hear about the footprint reduction. I hope you can help steer that in a different direction.
I'm trying to get back onto the Scala track as soon as I can.
Yeah. We're also, I don't know, Scala 3 sounds also difficult where we're at with Francisco, but it's a dream. And I guess I'll add to my story on how I got to Scala, and Monica, if you'd like to afterward. Well, actually, with software engineering in general, it was an accident for me. I studied religion and Japanese in college, and then I was fired from my first job as a legal assistant, and then a technical recruiter. So I did coding as a hobby, and then that's how I got into software engineering. And then with Scala, I mostly did Java stuff first, and then a Scala shop was open to people who knew Java or a JVM language and were interested in learning Scala, and they were patient with me. So that was in 2017, and I haven't left since the language. But I still, like Eric kind of said, sometimes I feel like some of the talks are over my head, but I do appreciate when I can understand, and then when also talks are accessible to lots of different levels and so on. And not to put you on the spot, Monica, but did you want to add about how you got into Scala?
Yeah, sure. So my kind of when I learned how to program was really after I'd left school. I took a year out, and one of the kind of opportunities they have in the UK is a like engineering development trust, where they offer kind of year-long placements for people to kind of get into engineering careers without having to go to university first. So I managed to get a engineering job, which was mainly kind of like focused on learning how to code and coding in C++, C#, sorry. And then when I went to university, I found that my university had a scholarship that was aimed at helping women in STEM subjects get into technology kind of careers. So I studied physics at uni, and I knew I enjoyed the kind of software engineering side of things. And one of the great things this scholarship offered was a year-long placement, like work placement, in between the second and third year of your studies. So I applied for it. I got it. I went and did my placement at JP on the kind of same team I'm on now. But back then I was doing mainly front-end development. So then when I graduated last year, I came back, joined the same team, but kind of a slightly different part of it. And that's when I started to learn Scala. So yeah. Nice. Thanks.
Golf claps all around.
Yeah, that's awesome. I'm glad that there are these more structured programs that to reach out to folks, women in STEM, just to keep help more people who wouldn't normally have thought to get into Scala or more back-end engineering, etc. And so I think that leads kind of into my next question. Well, I two questions. Let's go with the first one. How has how has your learning journey in Scala been for you? Have there been some certain materials or communities that have been more accessible or inclusive for you than others, and why not? Anyone who is willing to answer first, go ahead, or we can do a hand raise.
I can. Oh, Francisco, you want to take it first?
Okay, thank you very much. No, like actually, the way in which I got into Scala was because I was working for an applied research team at uh, some university here, and one I did a really good friend there. He was a mathematician actually, so he actually was super passionate about functional programming, and he introduced me to Haskell and Scala. So I didn't know about them before that. I was already very passionate about software engineering, etc. I was very passionate about Node.js actually, and but I think it was like his passion that actually like infected me, and I think a lot of times it's not so much about, we already have the internet, like we have access to like a million tutorials and books and whatever not. But a lot of time I think that the best resource is just the motivation to go through all of that. And I think that one of the best resources one can have, and that places like Mexico actually lack are passionate people that come and share and say, hey, this is super cool, why don't you give that a try. So I think that's one of the biggest barriers for a lot of misrepresented groups to actually go through and get into these kind of things, like, for example, functional programming in Scala. It's just that they need to give it a try, right? So I think that I was fortunate enough to have met people that motivated me a lot to learn about, go from just getting curious about Scala and all the way to like being curious about all these fancy words, monads, functors, whatever not. And I think it changes your perspective and absolutely shapes the way in which you learn, because I think for a lot of people, their biggest challenge when learning something is the way they face it. It's very different when you face a challenging topic like functors. If you face it with skepticism or some like even fear, we all have all of these psychological traps within us. But if there's someone here to say like, no, don't look at it that way, just look at how cool it is, then your whole mind shifts and it's way easier and fun to learn. So I think that's has been my like best resource. Sorry, Adam, you can go.
No, you have nothing to apologize for. I guess for me, like, so similar to you, Francisco, like I had a mentor figure at Bank of America, really got me into the Scala programming language, showed me how much less Java code I could be writing effectively, right? I think we've all been there with getters and setters back in Java 6, 7, 8 days, and just ungodly amounts of boilerplate. And I remember the very first project we were working on at Bank of America, I mentioned this earlier with this rate engine thing, but we had put out a prototype, like an MVP, and it was 84 lines of Scala code. The previous rate engine that was being maintained was over 17,000 lines of Java code. Now, of course, our prototype was not like one-to-one feature comparable, right? But that we were able to get over the like barrier to entry of like, okay, we can actually return exchange rates to customers based on what those rates are in the database table in less than 100 lines of code. I was like, oh, I'm sold. Like, this is incredible. Like, if I never have to read a 4,000 line Java class again, I will stick to this. But in terms of like barrier to entry, like Scala was definitely one of the most difficult languages to learn, I would say, because I'm a very like visual and like auditory learner. I don't do well with textbooks, unfortunately. And a lot of the documentation for Scala is written down. There's not many online tutorials for it outside of like Coursera and stuff like that, and those are very collegiate level, very theory heavy courses. And so starting off like the Martin Odersky course on Coursera and immediately diving into recursive functions and functors and monads, and I'm like, I have no idea what is going on, was kind of a turnoff at first, but then as I'm sure most folks here are probably familiar with, Alvin Alexander has a blog site where he answers a lot of like questions based in the Scala language and provides answers for them using Scala examples. I was like, oh, I can understand this. Like, I know what a monad is. Like, oh, okay. So I'm very grateful to folks like Alvin Alexander. I'm very grateful to the Zio team and how much love and care they've put into their documentation and tutorials. And I think outside of like just the JavaScript community, which I guess we're all de facto a part of for better and for worse, I would say that Scala has been one of the most inviting communities that I've ever been a part of in software engineering. But I would just love to see more video tutorial work out there, very much like kind of like explain like I'm 5 level videos, because while functional programming can be very intimidating, it doesn't have to be. And I would love to see more stuff like that out there.
Thanks, Adam. Did anyone else want to into that?
I'd like to share my story, but Monica, why don't you go first?
Sure.
I think you can go first.
Yeah, I guess just on the like kind of following your point of the Scala community being very like inviting and kind of welcoming so far. I found I've been quite lucky in terms of the team I've joined has really kind of put an emphasis on teaching junior developers Scala and teaching them to write code in like a very good and like best practices way, rather than just kind of like write code so that you can push out production stuff and it will kind of get results as quickly as possible. We've kind of got like a bit of a culture. So I didn't say this earlier, but I'm based in London, and on my team we have kind of like weekly mob programming sessions that started out as a way to kind of like get in a room and learn Scala, but it's developed into we've looked at like different Scala libraries and kind of like trying to understand them from like not having the kind of complexities of the domain that we're working in, but just kind of taking that away and having a look at the libraries. For example, we've been doing in the past like year, one of my team members was writing like a Twitter clone, and just kind of seeing like how do you use these libraries without the kind of challenges of trying to understand the domain you're working in. And then more recently, we've moved into kind of like more general software engineering practices. And then we also have like another member of our team runs like a weekly kind of Scala study session where we've kind of like gone from understanding like how do you model like JSON, for example, and then we're doing like a basically re-implementing a JSON parser, so you can go from like encoding JSON, parsing it, and then back to the JSON type class, and just kind of having those I guess like really structured opportunities like in your team already, and kind of having that culture of, you know, it's okay to kind of like not understand everything first time, and you can learn, and it's very acceptable to like, you know, say I don't know how to do this, but I like know that I've got people around me who can like teach and you can learn from, has been like one of the reasons why I've enjoyed this past year so much, is having that opportunity and having those people to kind of learn from. So yeah, it's been like really welcoming. It's been like a really positive experience. So yeah.
So for me, I look back, you know, about 20 years ago, I was working on my master's degree in computer science, and I was naturally like inclined to take classes in programming languages. And so one of the things that I had to do in my master's program was code in OCaml and code in, I think, standard ML. And I remember feeling like, oh, this is really cool. But I don't know how I'm going to use this in my day job. Like, I was a software engineer. At that time, I worked at a financial exchange, and we did stuff in Java. Like it wasn't C++, it was Java. But and this was trading platform, so it was, you have to use Java very specifically in a certain way. So fast forward to like 2008, I kind of decided I want to learn Scala. Like I really want to learn Scala, but there really didn't seem to be an easy way to do that. So I grabbed a book and I played with it on the side. Finally, around 2014, I was at a job at Nokia, or at that point, I think we might have been here. I think the name change happened in there. And it started to become part of the culture that people were moving towards Scala. And so this was an opportunity for me to get onto a team within the company where I would be exposed to it. And when I look back over my career, the way I've learned new technologies has been to be immersed in it, right? So by being immersed in it, I'm starting to do it. I'm starting to learn from the people around me. I surround myself with people who are ahead of where I'm at in terms of understanding, who are going to help me level myself up. And I did that with Scala. I went over to Rally Health, like I said before, OO Scala. We did a lot of OO type Scala. And really the one thing missing for me in the last couple of jobs has been the type level stuff, but I've always had that interest in getting there. And so, you know, getting this job that I have now where I am immersed in a community of people who are beyond where I'm at is amazing, like, because I'm getting exposed to things. Now, that's not to say there is a component of my learning that is learned by doing. When I first got into Scala, that summer, like 2014, 2015, I did a side project. I volunteered to help at, at an organization here in Chicago, and they needed a little system to like manage some data for like a live and silent auction event that they do. And I just wrote a little CRUD system, but I wrote it in Scala. And the next summer I used it again for the next year's event. And I modified the code, and it was amazing because I went from, that was the year I was working in Scala day to day. It was amazing to see how my OO or my Java Scala, like Java-like Scala was like, I was changing my code to not be Java-like Scala. So I saw my own evolution. The other thing I do is I grab books, and I mentioned that before. I've been working with a group of, so when the pandemic started, I started like a Haskell programming like group, a bunch of Rally friends. And by learning Haskell together, it sort of reinforced some concepts in Scala. And then now I've started to work with Scala with cats, which I haven't really done before. I'm kind of getting through that book. And just the other day after, I think it was, I forget who was, it was Michael's presentation. I think I bought the book like yesterday. So like, I was like, I'm going to use that book too. So there's these things that like, I grab these books, there's these different components of my learning.
If I may jump in for one quick second, Jazza. I love that everyone is mentioning that they have their communities at work as well, because I totally forgot about that as a level of community. I'm always thinking like, oh, meetups, public, GitHub, etc. But it really is important to have that kind of community at your place of work as well, because, you know, I was first introduced to it at work. My mentor was my manager, right? Obviously, Eric, you've hinted at it with Rally Health. Like, I think Rally Health was one of the few places I've worked at that really fostered that sense of community pretty thoroughly, whether it be your passion in Scala or Node.js or any, it could even be D&D, right? Like Dungeons and Dragons after work or something. But finding that community at work too, I think is super important. And I'm glad that it's paying dividends for Monica and everyone as well.
I can just respond to that. The one thing that worked really well at Rally was a fundamental respect for people.
Yes. Oh my God, yes.
That created an environment where it was safe to learn.
Yeah.
It was amazing.
Thank you, everyone. On the note of safety and our identities, I was wondering then, how has your identity influenced your experience as a software engineer, and in particular using Scala? And was safety an issue with your identity?
Yeah, I can take this first. I think in terms of like being a woman in software, I've had quite a positive experience so far in that, I got into Scala through a program dedicated towards getting women in STEM subjects, like I said, into technology. And I've had a lot of positive experience at work in terms of, other kind of senior female engineers. When I was on my placement year, in the same team, there wasn't any kind of female engineers in the team in London. And then when I came back a year and a half later, there was a lot more kind of diversity across the London team, and just kind of seeing that small incremental change towards kind of putting the importance on diversity and in terms of how we hire, was a really positive change to see. And also, I think being part of, I guess a generation of people that it's no longer okay to kind of not that it's no longer okay, but it's so much easier to call people out on when they're discriminating against people, or it's kind of I've never really had to experience that, and I'm really grateful for the fact that the culture is kind of shifting towards that it is completely unacceptable to kind of discriminate against somebody because of their identity. So I've had quite a positive experience so far, and hope that it just kind of continues to gather that momentum, and until there's a great the diversity across all the different kind of back end, front end is kind of a lot better and goes towards a much more positive and diverse group of people. So
I have a thought here I'd like to share. So I think being a member of the LGBTQIA community has heightened my awareness of just in general privilege, my own privilege as a white male. I fit into software engineering pretty well, but what I have noticed, and I had an experience about 10 years ago with a team I was part of, I was more senior to the other folks on the team. We had a woman on the team and we had a bunch of guys, and I was presenting a complicated architecture for a project we were working on. And the woman got it, but she didn't say anything, and she just kind of sat there, and the guys were all lost and confused. But the woman I worked with, she felt, and I kind of picked up on this because I'm pretty empathic, she felt that she couldn't speak up. And so I could identify on a human level with this person, and I was I need to reinforce that whatever is going on in her head, she needs to I want her to get beyond that, because I want her to feel and understand that she's as good or better than these guys, right? Mm-hmm. And so I've been very aware of that in my own work, and I'm always looking to have more women on my team, not just one. It's usually one woman and a bunch of guys, and I'd love to have more women in software engineering. So that's just my experience as a gay man, identifying with other folks who are in software engineering, especially in a more minority than I am.
Yeah, I guess I can also comment super fast. My experience as a Mexican, especially that lived and worked for 6 years in Amsterdam. Maybe I was fortunate that it was in Amsterdam, because Amsterdam is incredibly diverse. It's extremely international. Actually, almost too much for people from Amsterdam. It's actually a social, a whole topic in there. Actually, there's so many internationals that they're starting to get uncomfortable. But the companies, for example, they were all super international. It's funny because these companies, depending on the company, there might be more people from certain places of the world. So, for example, in TNT FedEx, I think it was very diverse. There were people from Brazil. I was Mexican, India, all over, France, England, etc. So it was a very diverse team within, internationally, talking about nationalities. Then it was, Vion was it is the biggest Russian telecommunication company, and it was like mostly Ukrainians and Russians there. And ING, it's like the most Dutch company ever. So it's like mostly Dutch with some Indians, and then here and there a couple of things. But in general, I think I was lucky enough that, you know, I made really good friends from like across. I don't know. I think, you know, I do feel like Monica said that, you know, these generations are like evolving in that sense. Like we're more comfortable with being with each other, even if we feel if we're from different parts of the world or we identify differently, etc. So that's definitely super good. But there's definitely still, I guess, these challenges of, you know, diversity could be even more, right? So I guess internationally we're good, but there's other types of identity which I think are still very clear, disproportionate, right? Like female versus male, developers, etc. I think is the biggest one, maybe. Um, so, so yeah, but you know, then again, just to fall back to that, as a Mexican in Europe, I never had like any issues of, you know, being discriminated because I was Mexican or anything like that. I think I was received with a lot of, you know, curiosity about my culture, etc. You know, some challenges because, you know, there's a lot of stereotypes of Mexicans outside of Mexico. Like, especially I arrived when, you know, Narcos was a very big Netflix series. So I had to like try to, you know, tell people that Mexico and Mexicans are not like that, and that we're not characterized by those social topics, right? But besides that, I think I had a good experience.
I'm trying to be very careful with my words because I know this can be a grenade of a topic for sure. In terms of my own personal experiences, to Eric's point along the lines of privilege, I've been very grateful to, or not grateful, but like I have been very privileged being white presenting, even though I identify as biracial, where I have been given more opportunities than other folks have. In particular, I remember a time being a part of a hiring team, and we got down to like a handful of candidates. Two of them were white men, one was a black man. Um, and we went with one of the white candidates because they'd actually had experience coding in Scala before, even though the black candidate was clearly like the best candidate out of all of them. He just hadn't coded in Scala before. He coded in Java, Python, of course, JavaScript, and I think it was Erlang or something. I can't remember exactly, but you know, in that particular instance, Scala was kind of used as this like filtering or like discrimination tactic of like, oh, we're not going to offer this individual that opportunity because they don't know this specific language, and perhaps they may not know that domain space, and they may not know all the libraries and tools that we're using and this, that, and the other. And part of me is like, I get it, capitalism, you just want to hire the person who knows everything and yada yada yada. But on the other hand, you know, and Jaslyn and Eric, you can back me up on this. Like at Rally, we were very into fostering the right talent. Like if you had had the skills, if you had had the capacity to learn, and you were, you know, willing to demonstrate that enthusiasm, we'd give you a chance, right? And I think we need more places like that to give folks those opportunities, to give folks those chances. Yeah. I think that's where I'll stop because I think everything else is probably a grenade.
We were more likely to take, you know, someone who had a diversity of experience like that, who needed to learn Scala, but they were the strong candidate and they were the right fit for the company, over someone who had a lot of Scala experience, who had like kind of a big attitude problem. Like we had no interest in that because that would have poisoned our culture of positivity, of uplifting people, of helping people grow into like who they wanted to be as developers.
And that's actually an excellent point too about just fostering community, right? Because it's not just simply about inviting people in, but it's also about, you know, rewarding certain behaviors and expectations within your community as well. Like if you are part of a community that you know is celebrating somebody who maybe is a bit of a landmine themselves in terms of personality or personal views on the world. Again, I know Scala Conf here, like we know that there is a challenges, let's call them, in the broader Scala community. But I think if we make conscious efforts to see past somebody's, technical aptitude and to call them out for perhaps their personal beliefs, if they are so bold as to share them publicly, and reward people who are more inviting, who are more inclusive, who are willing to fold people into the Scala community and make it even better, it helps to just make a more wholesome and positive community, and it leads to a better feedback loop.
So then I think that Adam's point about Scala being used, previous Scala experience being used as a filtering technique leads into, I realize now the time has quickly passed.
Oh yeah.
Okay, a final question then. How can we, as the Scala community, in our work, in open source, in conferences, etc., help, foster a more diverse and inclusive environment? Adam mentioning giving folks who don't have Scala experience the opportunity to be immersed, as Eric mentioned, in a workplace environment. I'm glad Monica and Francisco are noting as in the current times, people are generally becoming having better attitudes about inclusivity, but it's still clearly a problem. So what are some other ideas folks have to improve diversity?
Yeah, kind of like topical of having just done a talk at Scala Days. I think one of the things that's, again, like that I really enjoyed this past year is having mentors that kind of encourage you to do things that you didn't really think that you could do. I was really encouraged to apply for Scala Days, and at first I was like, what am I going to talk about? I don't have the kind of Scala knowledge to give a conference talk. Like, that seemed kind of pretty outworldly. So I think, but then, I applied, I got accepted, and it was a really great experience, and I really enjoyed kind of getting the chance to do a presentation like that, but also kind of meeting other people across kind of Europe and beyond of working in Scala and kind of getting that networking opportunity. So I think encouraging people to kind of apply for things like this and kind of do kind of talks at conferences, do talks at meetups, organize meetups in the first place, I think is like a really great way to kind of foster that that kind of like sense of community and kind of like keep making sure people feel very like included in the community if they're actually contributing towards it, like in a kind of like giving talks and that kind of thing. So
100%.
Yeah, and actually, like I agree. Like, I think extending like direct invitations to a more diverse group, it's a really great way of doing it. I think one of the biggest challenges with diversity, equality, etc., even like harder topics like racism, etc., is it the implicit bias that culture has and that still has. Like, yeah, actually, for example, one of the biggest topics right now in Mexico is gender equality. So there's a really big feminist movement right now, and a lot of things are happening in these last years. But so, and I think that has exposed all of these cultural bias that we have for the role of men and women in society. And what I think is especially dangerous about any cultural bias, it might be race, gender, whatever, is that it's implicit. It's like you don't know you have it. You don't know that you're behaving following that bias, right? And even if you're like you're the one receiving the damage, you're probably just damaging yourself even more because you don't know that you have that bias. So, and what I'm leading to is that a lot of times when there's like open invitations to, participate in things like, engineering, tech, Scala, the open invitation is accepted by people that they identify themselves as people interested and capable of, participating. And I think that a lot of people might be falling into their own bias of saying like, I'm not the type of person that will get interested into engineering, or I wouldn't be the type of person that, will be a great functional programmer, Scala engineer, right? And they probably could. They just need to give it a try, right? So I think it's important. One way in which we can like extend the invitation to people from minorities is well, I think it's important to have people that influentiate or that are passionate and maybe belong to these communities, and infect with this passion to the people and show them that they don't have to follow this implicit bias, right? You need to break the implicit bias. I think there's like an internal like barrier that gets destroyed once you see someone else like you being able and being identified with something that you couldn't see yourself with. Like a very like dumb example was that I used to be, very nerdy, very unhealthy, unshape. I was overweight, and one of the things that really like stopped me was that I couldn't see myself as someone that will go to the gym. Like me equals gym was like impossible, right? But it was a certain moment in which I was inspired by a friend and actually started seeing myself as someone that could go to the gym and actually started liking the gym. So like it was just my mind shifted, and then I realized that I was someone that liked the gym, right? And being fit and etc. So so I think we just need, and that's one of the roles that I want to have in Mexico here, is expose other Mexicans to Scala and functional programming. Say, hey, if you like it, come over here. We have all these fun things. We have the Northeast Scala Symposium. You probably love it.
There you go. I guess for me, like I think it starts with like apprenticeship opportunities, right? I think Monica, your story resonates pretty significantly with me because I'd also like, well, not also, I'd gone to like a coding boot camp, and that was kind of my foray into the software engineering career space. But seeing that someone like yourself in uni had an opportunity to go learn coding as a job, as like an actual paid position, and work with people who are doing it day in and day out and actually can teach you like best practices and this that, and the other, not just theory at uni, right? But you're actually applying it. I think that's huge, right? And I think we ought to lean into that more as a community. Once folks are in places of work or within the community at large, mentorship opportunities are huge. Teaching people just, the ins and outs, what libraries are out there, how to engage communities more broadly, how to contribute to open source projects, and how to convince your own company and your own workspace how to better adopt, say, more open source libraries and frameworks and things of that nature. Next, I would say would be sponsorship from within companies. So sponsorship can take many forms, but I think in particular, as we can all probably recognize, having more minority voices and representation within positions of leadership is significant in making a overall company experience far more inclusive. And leadership doesn't simply have to be management, right? It could be bring someone from a junior engineering position to a staff engineering position to a senior engineering position to a principal to an architect, whatever your individual contributor track may look like, but having somebody to sponsor you for those opportunities is massive. And then lastly, I think, Jazza, you can possibly back me up on this, but monitoring, not monitoring, maybe that's like implying censorship, but like the language that we use in describing technology, right? I think Nowadays, most of us are very comfortable with having a main branch on Git, but that's a fairly new paradigm shift. Like for ages, it was just master, right? And we're all coming to terms with like a lot of the technology terms that we use every single day, whether that be blacklist, whitelist, master-slave relationships, problematic language there, and just being culturally sensitive to people's different backgrounds in the language that we use day to day. I had another point. Making sure that we're reminding people that software engineering is not simply front-end coding, and that it's not all, CSS and pretty flex grids, right? It's, there are complicated challenges that we can tackle on the back-end space, and there's plenty of opportunity to grow and develop in that space as well. We didn't get to the AI revolution with simple, JavaScript Flexbox stuff. So making sure that we increase the amount of educational opportunities out there on the web and flattening that curve as much as we can. So trying to be mindful of time, so I'm trying to like go through it as quickly as possible.
Thanks, Adam. Although, to be fair, I feel like the front end is getting way more complicated. But I guess you're trying to say, like, we especially want to improve the diversity on the back end and the Scala too, not
exactly.
Just, yeah. Eric, did you have any last minute thoughts? Or, no pressure.
Oh no, I was just coughing.
Okay. Well, honestly, we're over time. Thanks, Justin, for the flexibility in the schedule. I was honestly nervous how I don't know how this would go, but I feel like we keep going for even longer. But thanks again, everyone, for coming here. Your insights, I learned a lot, even though I think I know a lot on the subject, but that's why diversity of perspective is so important.
Yeah.
Yeah. So.
Ooh, maybe one last thing is it's okay to make mistakes when it comes to like this diversity stuff, right? No one is expecting you to be perfect on every single front, as long as you demonstrate a willingness to learn and a willingness to grow. That is so important, both at work and elsewhere. Sorry.
No, sorry.
Thank you, Jasna, for hosting and for facilitating. And also, it's been just great talking with all of you on the panel.
Jasna for president.
Stop the recording. Thanks all.
Thank you to all of the panelists. This was great, and I think very helpful and educational to everybody here. So yes, now I will actually stop the